Their smell was unbearable, even to their own allies, yet they were among the most lethal men to fight in Vietnam. Forget Rambo, forget the movies. What you are about to hear was hidden in classified archives for decades, because it was deeply embarrassing for American generals to acknowledge. While U.S. troops were eating steaks and listening to rock music and code, Australian Ghost Unit was doing something unthinkable. They stopped washing. They stopped behaving like normal humans. They lay in their own filth for days to make themselves invisible. Why did the Vietkong place a bounty on their heads, 5 times higher than that of an American Green Beret? What was the secret jungle diet that altered their body chemistry? And why did a U.S. general scream at them for returning alive without firing a single shot? Today, the Phantom Trail files are being opened, revealing the dirty, brutal, and stomach, turning truth about the only men who defeated the jungle at its own game. This is not the history taught in schools. This is the story of men who became animals to survive hell. Brace yourself, because this story must be told. Saigon, 1968. In an air-conditioned office where the air felt unnaturally cold and dry, a moment unfolded that could have doomed the entire American war effort. An American general whose name history quietly erased slammed a stack of reports onto a polished desk. His face was red with rage, and the veins in his neck strained under the pressure. Standing before him was an Australian officer from the Special Air Service Regiment, calm and unmoved. The general demanded numbers, not intelligence, not tunnel maps, not supply cache locations. He wanted statistics of dead enemies. Inside the headquarters of the United States Army, a belief ruled supreme, later known as the cult of body count. Victory was measured not in territory secured or lives saved, but in corpses reported to the evening news. A unit that returned without enemy bodies or inflated casualty numbers was considered an effective. American doctrine relied on noise and overwhelming firepower, believing that enough bombs and artillery would erase the enemy. But the Australian report showed 0 enemy contact, 0 shots fired, 0 bodies. This silence hid a terrifying truth the Pentagon refused to recognize to American command. The report was an insult. The general accused the 5th Australians of cowardice, claiming they hid instead of fighting. He could not grasp how an elite unit could spend 30 days in the jungle without firing a bullet. In his world, war was loud and bloody. The Australian officer stood firm, knowing what the bureaucrat in a clean uniform could not understand. The Australians were not avoiding war. They were dissecting it, while Americans measured success in bombs dropped. The SAS measured success in silence. They gathered intelligence that would later dismantle entire enemy networks with precision, instead of burning down the jungle blindly. This clash was more than a disagreement. It was a collision of 2 philosophies. One side was a massive, clumsy American machine, obsessed with statistics and public image. The other was a group of silent professionals who understood that, in the jungle, the man who fires first often dies second. Americans wanted spectacle for the cameras. Australians wanted results, even if invisible. This divide would lead to one of the most shocking truths of the war. Real horror was not in that office, but back at the bases. To understand why the Vietkong feared the Australians more than napalm, one only had to look at an American fire support base. These were not outposts, they were armed circuses. Slices of America dropped into hostile jungle, complete with hot showers, ice cream machines, barbecued steaks, and loud rock music blasting for kilometers. The smells of fried meat, diesel, and cologne drifted through the air, acting like a beacon to the enemy. To the SAS, this comfort was a death sentence. Comfort kills. Generators masked the sound of sappers cutting wire. Hot meals revealed exact locations. Americans believed technology and comfort made them superior, but the jungle respected only survival. Vietkong did not assault these bases directly. They walked around them or used them as practice targets. Vietnamese scouts could smell American patrols from far away, due to soap, toothpaste, chewing gum, and cigarettes. Americans announced themselves with every step. Australians understood that to defeat a jungle enemy, you had to become part of the jungle. Civilization had to be abandoned, while Americans used deodorant and fresh socks. Australians prepared to descend into a primal existence. They knew survival required shedding humanity. American general could shout about body counts. But deep in the jungles of Vietkong, the rules were different. The loudest man went home in a box. Australians chose silence, and that choice led them into a nightmare. No manual could predict American strategy relied on endless logistics helicopters, delivering water-hot meals and luxury goods. It was a war of excess. Once supply lines failed, the system collapsed. Soldiers trained to overwhelm could not endure deprivation. Australians built doctrine on self-reliance and austerity. They saw glowing bases as vulnerable beasts thrashing in the dark. The SAS chose to be shadows. They rejected comfort and stripped away civilization until only the predator remained. This choice carried a cost. Technology could not solve everything, and in 1968, that idea was heresy. Australians were effectively saying the Americans were wrong. Despite billions spent and massive firepower, the Americans were losing because they refused to adapt. Noise and smell killed young soldiers daily. Australians vowed not to repeat that mistake. They would watch from darkness, decide when silence broke. But to do this, they had to transform in ways even allies found disgusting. It began with a bar of soap, or rather the removal of it. The order was simple and absolute. Stop washing, stop brushing teeth, stop using deodorant. Soap, toothpaste, shaving cream, and detergent were confiscated. 2 weeks before deployment, barracks became pits of human odor. The goal was to erase modern chemical signatures from their bodies. Western skin was soaked in artificial scents that screamed foreigner. In tropical heat, those smells traveled far. This was only the first step. Soldiers were issued heavy anti-malarial drugs and vitamin B compounds that altered sweat chemistry. Aim was to eliminate the sharp smell of fear and Western diet. They rubbed red clay, charcoal, and rotting leaves into skin and uniforms until they blended with the landscape. Their stench was overwhelming. Civilians would gag. American officers recoiled, writing reports about filth and lack of discipline. They did not understand this filth was armor stronger than Kevlar discipline in Vietkong. 2 meant smelling like a swamp. While Australians became biological ghosts, Americans made fatal mistakes. Their uniforms, washed in detergents with optical brighteners, glowed under night vision. Worse was smell: menthol, cigarettes, mint gum, chocolate, soda, processed food. To Vietnamese trackers, Americans could be smelled from hundreds of meters. The scent of sugar, tobacco, dairy, and soap did not exist in nature. The jungle reacted. Birds fled, monkeys went silent, and enemies prepared to kill. Then came the ultimate betrayal of their own culture. The diet, if banning soap was hard, the trader's menu was torture. Western food was banned: steaks, beer, bread, and cheese. Removed weeks before missions, they ate cold rice, dried fish, fermented fish sauce, vegetables, bamboo shoots, bitter greens, and weak tea. Bodies rebelled, stomachs cramped, energy crashed. But by the 3rd week, their blood chemistry changed. Their sweat no longer smelled Western. It smelled like fish, garlic, and old rice. They smelled like Vietnamese farmers, like the enemy. This was ultimate camouflage. A Vietkong sentry could stand 5 meters away, smell familiarity, and feel no danger. No satellite could detect this weapon, while Americans landed with soda and hamburgers. Australians dissolved into the jungle, starving, filthy, miserable, but erased from its sensory map. Operation Phantom Trail began in silence. Sergeant Darling and 5 men stepped from a helicopter and vanished. Time ceased. Moving through jungle was an art. They advanced 300 meters per hour, each step deliberate. They flowed around branches, used hand signals, and absolute silence. This slowness revealed what technology missed. Hidden under canopy lay a Vietkong supply trail, invisible from the air. A masterpiece woven into jungle life. The SAS halted. They would not destroy the trail, they would destroy the network. They positioned themselves less than 2 meters from the trail and established a hard layup, absolute immobility. For 48 hours, they became statues. Muscles cramped circulation, slowed the urge to move, became unbearable. Worse was dignity. They urinated and defecated in their uniforms, lying in their own waste. Insects attacked, ants bit, mosquitoes fed. They could not swat, blink, or twitch. Tears ran, but rifles stayed steady. A Vietkong squad passed so close mud splashed on SAS. Boots' one enemy stopped less than a meter from Darling. He looked directly at him, but saw only mud, leaves, and shadow. He moved on unaware. He stared into death. The Australians gathered priceless intelligence. Supply counts, officer identification schedules. For the first time, all eyes had eyes inside enemy logistics, all with 0 casualties. When they attempted radio contact, disaster struck. The operator whispered using breath. Only the American pilot could not hear and demanded louder transmission. Unable to comply, the Australians were abandoned. The departing aircraft drew enemy attention. Patrols swept the area. The Australians ran, emaciated, furious, betrayed. They escaped through stealth and jungle. Knowledge, when extracted by Australian pilots. Smell inside the helicopter was unbearable. At base, medics found rotting skin, fungal infections, trench foot. Yet the mission was a triumph. 5 men mapped a major supply route, identified commanders, and returned alive. Compared to costly American missions, the result was undeniable. The United States lost the war, noise, and firepower. Could not defeat shadows. The methods of the SAS endured and shaped modern special operations today. Elite soldiers trained to be ghosts. The lesson of Phantom Trail is clear. War is not about the biggest gun. It is about enduring the unendurable Americans tried to conquer. The jungle Australians became it, and the jungle always wins.